To understand Western civilization, we need to grasp the essence of Greek philosophical thought, as well as have an understanding of the biblically based religions that form the spiritual heart of the West. Now, one pundit rightly said that the whole history of intellectual thought in the West was nothing more than a series of footnotes to Plato. But we're going to look at some of Plato's predecessors. We started with a video on Thales of Miletus, who looked around at the world and tried to explain it not in religious terms, but in rational terms, and he concluded that everything was ultimately caused by and sustained by water. Now, one of his students, Anaximander, an extraordinary mind in human history, he disagreed with his teacher. He said, how could water cause everything? Most Greeks took it for granted that there were four substances. There was fire, water, earth, and air. And he said, water puts out fire, it can't cause it. So how were all of these opposites created and sustained? And he came up with an extraordinary notion that the infinite, the boundless, the borderless, was the cause of all these contradictory elements and held them all in balance to sustain the creation around us. And when he looked at the created world around him, he saw the sun and the moon. And he didn't think of them as gods or goddesses, but as fiery wheels going through the sky. And their light would come out of these little vents. And during a solar eclipse, the vents would close, the sun would darken, and then the vents would eventually start opening again. This happened on a monthly basis in the lunar cycle, where the moon would become darkened, crescent, gibbous, and full in the course of 28 days. He looked upon the earth as a cylinder, which was flat on top, and we lived on that flat part of the cylinder. But the extraordinary understanding that he had was that the cylinder was suspended over nothingness. Now, most of the primitive peoples of the earth felt the planet was based on pillars, on a big foundation. These Psalms, which predated the time of Anaximander, who lived in the 600s BC, they said the earth is set on its pillars, never to be moved. And Thales himself, the teacher of Anaximander, said, well, the earth is just floating on a great ocean. And Anaximander said, no, there's nothing there. An extraordinary intuition of what we now know as true. Now, it didn't move, the earth didn't move, because he felt that it was equidistant from all other objects in the universe and couldn't move and didn't need to move in any direction. Hence, that suspended spot of the earth. An extraordinary creative mind. So much so that Aristotle and others would quote him often. Even St. Hippolytus in the early 3rd century AD would refer to him because of his notion that something infinite had to be involved in sustaining the world around us, which is ultimately finite. He was a man of vision, a man of profound thought. He had some really big ideas. What's the big ideas in your life? Our ideas can be stimulated by looking at the great ideas of others. Read up on the ancient philosophers. See what they had to say. Why did they say it? And begin to think for yourself in the midst of this world. The bigger your ideas, the larger your vision of what life is about will become.